The story of global power usually begins with money, but it almost always ends with gunpowder. For years, the world looked at BRICS as merely a financial meeting ground where developing nations complained about the dollar and signed a few trade deals. That view is now outdated. What began as a handshake between economists is rapidly hardening into a clenched fist of military cooperation. This evolution is most visible in the multinational naval exercise Will for Peace 2026, currently taking place in South African waters under the BRICS Plus framework. The exercise is led by China and includes the Russian corvette Stoiky and the massive Iranian expeditionary sea base Makran. The presence of these specific ships signals a shift from defensive posturing to long-range power projection. The Makran is essentially a floating mobile island that can support helicopters and fast boats thousands of miles from Iranian shores. A ship like that, operating alongside Chinese guided missile destroyers in the Atlantic, sends a message that these nations can sustain a military presence far outside their traditional neighborhoods. They are showing Washington that the Atlantic Ocean is no longer a private NATO lake. The primary mission of these drills is joint actions to ensure the safety of shipping, which is diplomatic code for breaking a blockade. In a real conflict or a scenario with extreme sanctions, the United States could theoretically use its navy to stop tankers carrying oil to China or Russia. This exercise practices the exact counter-move to that threat. The ships are drilling convoy escort operations in which warships form a protective ring around merchant vessels. They are learning how to detect hostile submarines and incoming missiles while keeping the cargo ships moving. This is the physical mechanism of sanction evasion. You cannot enforce an oil embargo if the tanker is surrounded by 3 navies ready to shoot back. Another critical reason for this exercise is to break the language barrier of war. At present, these countries cannot fight together overnight because Russian, Chinese, and Iranian ships use different radio frequencies and digital codes. If they try to coordinate in a real emergency without practice, they would likely jam each other's signals or collide. Will for Peace forces them to synchronize their communications and radar systems. They are building a common operating language so that a Chinese radar operator can pass targeting data to a Russian missile crew instantly. This interoperability turns 3 separate regional navies into a single global force capable of complex joint operations. The timing and the theme are a direct response to the economic pressure coming from the West. The narrative of protecting maritime economic activities is a clear signal that BRICS Plus views trade defense as a military priority. They are preparing for a world where economic competition turns into physical interdiction. By securing the waters around South Africa, they are ensuring that even if the Mediterranean is closed off, they can still move energy and goods from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean without asking for permission. This exercise is the steel spine that supports the economic body of the BRICS alliance. The inclusion of Iran and Egypt in BRICS is not about their GDP, but rather about their geography. Egypt controls the Suez Canal, which handles roughly 12% of global trade, and Iran dominates the Strait of Hormuz, where nearly 20% of the world's oil passes daily. South Africa sits atop the Cape of Good Hope, the primary alternate route for global shipping. By bringing these nations into the fold, the alliance effectively secures the most critical maritime choke points on the planet. This is not just a trade pact, but a masterclass in geostrategy. Control over these waterways ensures that if a conflict arises or if sanctions attempt to strangle their economies, the alliance can keep the arteries of global trade flowing on its own terms. From Donald Trump's worldview, exercises like Will for Peace 2026 are not seen as neutral confidence-building drills. Trump has always viewed international relations in transactional power balance terms. Any attempt by non-Western blocs to coordinate militarily outside US-led structures is interpreted less as cooperation and more as a challenge. In his first presidency, Trump repeatedly criticized allies for free-riding, and he was equally blunt about China and Russia building parallel systems that dilute American influence. A BRICS-aligned naval exercise in globally critical waters would fit his long-held belief that rivals are trying to rewrite the rules of global security while benefiting from open trade. The aggressive America First stance and the weaponization of the dollar have left emerging powers with no choice but to build a storm shelter, and the emergence of a security apparatus within BRICS Plus is the direct result of this pressure. While the group began with a focus on currency, its members quickly realized that financial independence is impossible without physical security. Countries cannot operate a sovereign trade route if a foreign navy can blockade their ports. They cannot bypass the dollar if their oil tankers are vulnerable to interception. This logic has pushed the bloc to expand its scope from tariffs to tanks. The nations involved are acknowledging that true sovereignty requires a shield capable of repelling not just market volatility but also military coercion. Donald Trump's aggressive stance on trade and foreign policy acts as a powerful accelerant for this militarization. His approach often utilizes the American military footprint as leverage in trade negotiations. This strategy forces nations to seek a counterbalance. When Washington threatens to impose tariffs or withdraw security guarantees, it creates a vacuum that BRICS Plus is eager to fill. The unpredictable nature of America First policies signals to the global South that reliance on Western security architecture is a liability. Consequently, these nations are moving to unionize their defense capabilities to ensure that their economic lifelines remain open no matter who sits in the White House.